Osehi, and I am a senior economics tutor for OneClass. And today we're just going to go over a couple of economic questions. How it's going to work is there's a bunch of questions you guys have submitted. Our junior tutors would have given an answer, and I'm just going to walk you through the thought process on how to achieve those answers. A little bit about myself is I have a bachelor's in economics, and I currently work for one of the big five banks as an analyst. So, with that being said, let's just get started right away. All right, so question number one. What is GDP? How is it calculated? What would happen to the economy's GDP if the economy suddenly made the production of a good or service which was previously legal and now illegal? Next, based on your analysis of what would happen to GDP, what are the advantages and disadvantages this economy may experience? So our junior tutor answered, GDP, or gross domestic product, is a measure of the wealth or economy of countries. GDP is the total value of all goods produced within the borders of the country by both the native and the foreign population. GDP can be easily measured by the simple formula GDP, which is Y. So let's just write that down. So Y equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So that's a formula, and C equals consumption, I equals investments, G equals government spending, X equals export, and M equals imports. So we could also call this over here NX for net exports, and NX, which is net exports, is just equals to exports minus imports. Okay, so let's see what else they said. Production approach, total GDP equals total GDP is the sum of the gross value added by institutional units that are resident in the economy plus taxes minus subsidies. Okay? If we see from above approaches, if something gets banned or their production becomes illegal, then it will hit the economy very hard, as lots of people would lose jobs, which results in a fall in consumption because they would have no money, and at the same time investments would also fall as the entire production falls. So I agree with that. So let's just get into this a little further. If we look at the production approach here, we can also see two things happening. First, a fall in production, and second, a fall in taxes as the government gets sales tax and other taxes. We can therefore conclude that removing the production of any good would reduce GDP. For example, banning alcohol might have larger social benefits, but at the same time it would cost a very large economic cost. So I agree with this. So let's use the example of alcohol. And if you took away alcohol if you made alcohol illegal, then consumption of alcohol, which is C, would go down. And again, investments would also go down. And depending on what country we are, if alcohol is one of our biggest goods that we export to other countries, you could see our exports go down, which again reduces GDP. However, if alcohol was something that we imported, then M would go down, which is imports, and that actually has a positive outlook on GDP because we're always subtracting imports from total gross domestic product. And then if we look at it from the production level, for the production approach, so it's total GDP again, plus taxes minus subsidies. So let's just erase this right now. Again, alcohol isn't really taxed in Ontario, but let's say in the country that we're using here, there's a tax charged on alcohol, then government spending would also go down because of taxes. And government spending is also equals to taxes minus subsidies. So if there's a if you make alcohol illegal, then taxes go down, and thus that reduces overall GDP. And then the advantages, a large social benefit, so shifting of investment into another existing industry or a rise of a new industry. So again, this is a positive because I guess maybe whatever substitute or whatever substitute you could use for alcohol might not necessarily get you drunk. It creates an entry for those industries, or to create a new industry, and just that overall has a positive outtake in GDP because a new company or a new industry being created adds to total consumption. And disadvantages would be loss of jobs and the fall in GDP. So we've already gone over how it would reduce GDP, but the loss of jobs is just pretty straightforward, is that if you make alcohol illegal, the makers of alcohol in the country lose jobs. The individuals that would work at the places like the LCBO would also lose their jobs. So this answer right here is complete, and I'm in agreement with everything our junior economic tutor wrote over here. So let's just go ahead and verify that solution. All right. This is the next question over here. Let's go. Question number 2, actually. Oh, it's on erase. Question number 2. When marginal cost is lower than average variable cost, what is happening to average variable cost? When marginal cost is above average variable cost, what is happening to average variable cost? Hint, look at various cost curves. Why are the relationships you described in part A true? So let's see what our tutor said here. When marginal cost is lower than average variable cost, the average variable cost falls. Whereas when marginal cost is higher than average variable cost, the average variable cost increases. So I do agree with that. The one thing I would say is they could have used a graph, and I could just draw that graph out explaining even further. So we'll call this AVC, and we'll call this over here that first line was actually supposed to be the marginal cost. My apologies. So we'll call this first line marginal cost, and the second AVC for average variable cost. So again, our junior tutor said when marginal cost is lower than average variable cost, the average variable cost falls. And this is the marginal cost line, and it is lower then when it's lower than average variable cost, as you can see over here, average variable cost is reducing, it's going down. And second, let's just call this cost and Q. So when marginal variable cost is below average variable cost, then average variable cost is decreasing. And this point where they intersect is also the smallest point. It's the lowest point of AVC, of the average variable cost. And after that, marginal cost is above the average variable cost curve. And as you can see, as it goes above, average variable cost is increasing. So that would be a graphical depiction of the explanation. And part B says, why is this relationship you described in part A true? The reason for this is that marginal cost represents the cost of producing an additional unit, whereas average variable cost is an average of the production cost, less fixed cost, to produce a certain quantity. Thus, if marginal cost is higher than the average variable cost, the average would tend to rise, and therefore average variable cost would rise. And I think that's the key thing there, is that if marginal cost is increasing, then the average would tend to rise, and that's why average variable cost is increasing, would also rise. And if marginal cost is lower, then average variable cost would also go the opposite way, because it reduces the total average cost. So we would say this is correct. Okay. Question number 3. Let's just get this out of the way. Question number 3. If the market price for teaching is $10 per hour, what is the consumer surplus for the following students if they pay the market price? So gives us a bunch of scenarios. Jack is willing to pay $24 per hour for his consumer surplus. Jack is willing to pay $24 an hour to be tutored. So his consumer surplus is blank. Jill is willing to pay $21 an hour. Her consumer surplus is blank. Kathy is willing to pay $10 for 1 hour. Her consumer surplus is blank. And the total consumer surplus for the 3 students is. So first of all, this is what our junior tutor answered. Consumer surplus measures the benefit to buyers of participating in the market. It is measured by the amount the buyer is willing to pay minus the amount the buyer actually pays. So let's just write that down. CS for consumer surplus equals, we'll say, willingness to pay minus AP, we'll just say that is what they actually pay. Let's fix this up. What is actually paid. So that was good. The first thing they did was just give us a brief definition of what consumer surplus is. In this case, the individual purchases the consumer surplus is the difference between the willingness to pay, as shown on the demand curve, and the market price. For the market, the total consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the equilibrium price, beginning from the y-axis to the quantity purchased. Okay, we could draw the graph after, but let's just see how they calculate this. So Jack, his consumer surplus would be 24, which is his willingness to pay, minus 10, which equals 14. Jill, her consumer surplus was 21 minus 10, which is 11. So 21 was her willingness to pay, 10 was the market price, or what she actually paid. C, for Kathy, she has no consumer surplus because her willingness to pay is exactly the market price, and the total consumer surplus would be 25, which is just 14 at plus 11. So let's try to draw this on a graph now. So call this price, and we'll price, and we'll call this hours. So price for 1 hour is $10. Let's erase this. Actually, I think price should go on the bottom. Call this the hours. And we'll call this 1 right here. Jack was willing to pay 24. Joe was willing to pay 21. Kathy was willing to pay 10. And what they all actually paid was, sorry about that. So here they would be in and if Joe had paid it, this would have been her demand curve right here. And if Jack paid 10, this would have been his demand curve right here. This is messy, but basically their consumer surplus as a total is $25. So yeah, say correct with explanation. And then question number 4. Chris is willing to pay $40 for a haircut. Her stylist, Desiree, is willing to accept as little as $25 for a haircut. Question number 1. If the city where Chris and Desiree live instituted a tax service that included $5 per haircut, that stylist and barbers had to pay, what is the possible price that will make them better off? So the options are A, $28, B, $32, and C, $42. And our junior economic tutor said the answer is 32. And the answer is when the price is $32, the tax paid is $5. Then Chris gained a benefit of $8 because he was willing to pay 40 and he only paid 32. And Desiree has a benefit of $2 because after the tax that she needs to pay, her willingness to accept would have been $30 and she charged 32, so she accepted $2. So let's just write that down. So a price 32 Chris's benefit equals 40 minus 32 equals 8. And Desiree equals 32 minus 5 plus 25. And the reason it's 5 plus 25, she's willing to accept 25 before the tax. So after the tax that she needs to pay, her new willingness to accept would be 30, and that equals 2. Now, if we had a price of 42 instead of 32, so let's see the other options. If we had a price of 42 instead of 32, then Chris's benefit, he doesn't really have a benefit, it's negative, so he's not better off at all. Desiree, on the other hand, would be 42, so we'll just say Desiree was 42 minus 5 plus 25 equals 12, and she's extremely better off than if the price was 32. But since the question is asking which will make them both better off, C can't be our answer. And if the price was 28, Chris's benefit is 40 minus 28 equals 12. Desiree's benefit is 28 minus 5 plus 25 equals negative 2. So Chris is better off, but Desiree isn't. So the price can't be 28 either. So the correct answer, like our tutor said, is B. For question 2, if the city where Chris and Desiree live instituted a tax on services that included a $20 per haircut tax that stylists and barbers had to pay, what is the possible price that will make both of them better off? So our tutor here said $45, and the price is 45. Then a tax of 20 will not make Chris better off because the price is 45 and he's only willing to pay 40. And so the price of will not make Chris better off because the price of 45 is more than the price which she is willing to pay for a haircut. On the other hand, after deducting the tax, Desiree is left with $25, so it makes her better off. Question is asking what will make both of them better off. And let's just put this out again. So our tutor said it was C, but let's just check all of them again. So if the price was $30, Chris's benefit, so this is Chris, is $10. Desiree's benefit is Desiree's benefit is 20, and she's willing to accept 25, which is equal to 30 minus 45 equals to negative 15. So she isn't well off at all, and this is Desiree. And then, so we're going with a no for A of $30. The price was 35. Again, Chris is still well off with $5. Desiree, on the other hand, that's because it's 35 minus 45. Desiree is still not well off because she's losing she's losing money in that scenario. So we're not going to agree with that either. And for C, which is $45, let's see, Chris, his willingness to pay is 40 minus 45, so he's not well off here. And Desiree is 45. Sorry. Let's just put Desiree over here. Her benefit is 45 minus 20 plus 25 equals 0. So she isn't better off, but she's not losing money. And our tutor said C was the correct answer here. Don't necessarily agree with this. Actually, no, yeah, she is better off because she's making exactly what she's charging after she pays the tax. But it doesn't make Chris better off at all. So, but out of all the options, in the first option, Desiree was losing $15. Second option, she was losing 10. In this option, Chris is losing 5. So, out of all the options, if we had to pick, we'll take $45 as our best effort to make both of them happy. If this were all their choices. But Chris probably wouldn't get a haircut if they were charging $45. So we'll say C is fine. And question number 3. When compare the outcomes of $5 and $20, which of the following is correct? Chris will get a haircut from Desiree in both cases. Probably would not. Chris will get a haircut from Desiree if the tax is $5, but not if it's 20. And Chris will not get a haircut from Desiree in either case. So if the tax is $5, Chris is getting a haircut for sure. But if it's $20, because they'll be charging him $45, and his willingness to pay is 40, he wouldn't. So B is the correct answer here. Chris will get a haircut from Desiree if the tax is $5, but not if the tax is $20. So correct. So, question number 5 says, consider the following game of chicken. 2 firms are considering entering the market for fidget spinners. The payoffs from each possible action, enter and not enter, are presented in the payoff matrix below. The first payoff in each cell is for twisters. So here, just to look at it, if they both don't enter, then their payoffs is 0 each. If Acme Inc. enters and Twisters doesn't enter, then Acme gets a 1 payoff and Twisters get 0. If Twisters enter and Acme doesn't, Twisters gets a 1 payoff and Acme gets 0, and if they both enter, they both get a negative payoff. If both Acme and Twister make their choices simultaneously, which of the following is true? There is no Nash equilibrium. This game has a single Nash equilibrium. This game has more than one Nash equilibrium. Neither Acme nor Twisters has a strictly dominant strategy. So let's see what our tutor said. Nash equilibrium is a condition in a non-cooperative game in which no player can gain by changing its stance from the Nash equilibrium point. Both D and C are correct. There are 2 Nash equilibriums. Enter, don't enter, and don't enter and enter. In addition, there is also no strictly dominant strategy, which means that no player plays dominantly with one strategy. Therefore, option E is correct, as both C and D are correct. So I agree with that, and let's just look at the options. So there's definitely a Nash equilibrium here, because for Acme Inc., his Nash equilibrium would be enter, and Twisters for not enter, and that would be the same for Twisters. So that takes, because they both get a payoff, some sort of a payoff from those 2 options. So that takes off option A. It also takes up option B, because from what I said, there's 2 Nash equilibriums, one in which Acme enters and Twisters doesn't enter, and the other is when Twisters enters and Acme doesn't enter. So C, there's more than one Nash equilibrium, is correct. And neither Acme Inc. nor Twisters has a strictly dominant strategy. And I agree with that, because strictly dominant strategy means that no matter the outcome, the one player is better off than the other. And that's simply not true, because if his strategy is to if Acme Inc.'s strategy is to enter, if Twisters were to enter, he's worse off. They're both worse off. This is the only, it would only be a strictly dominant strategy is if when he enters, no matter what Twister does, Acme Inc. is always better off. And same thing goes for Twister. Their dominant strategy would only be if when they enter or don't enter, that no matter what Acme chooses, Twister is always going to be better off. So that's not true. So thus E is correct. We're saying both C and D are correct, that there is no strictly dominant strategy and there's more than one Nash equilibrium. So now we are looking at question 6. Excuse me. Explain in your own words the difference between elastic and inelastic demand by providing some examples. So simply put, demand is called elastic when a change in quantity is proportionately higher than the change in price. So, in other words, in the case of elastic demand, the percent change in quantity is higher than the percent change in price. So yeah, we could just do it as that. Elasticity of demand, first of all, equals percent change in Q over change in price. Demand is elastic when change in Q is greater than change in price. And we would probably say vice versa for when demand is inelastic. Elastic demand is generally seen in goods of which there are many substitutes. For example, if the price of a particular company's soft drink increases, the percent drop in demand will most likely be higher than the percent increase in demand. This is an example of demand elasticity. So, for example, let's just take Coke and Pepsi. If Coke were to significantly increase their price, then the quantity demanded would probably go down by a lot because they have a close substitute, which is Pepsi, and the quantity demanded for Coke would reduce and the quantity demanded for Pepsi would increase. So we'll say Coke probably has an elastic demand. And then on the other hand, demand is called inelastic when the change in quantity is proportionally lower than the change in price. In other words, in the case of inelastic demand, the percent change in quantity is lower than the percent change in price. Generally, inelastic demand is seen in essential goods such as medicines. For example, if the price of a particular medicine increases, the percent decrease in demand will most likely be lower than the percent increase in demand. This is a case of inelastic demand, and that's a perfect example because there's only one medicine to cure maybe whatever illness you might have, then it doesn't matter the price. Whether the price goes up or goes down, your change in demand wouldn't be that significant because it's a necessity and you need it to be cured. So I agree with this. So we'll say correct. Great explanation. All right. This is question 7. So let's say question 7 over here. Solve the following simultaneous equations. So the first one is 3y equals 2x. No, sorry about that. That's just supposed to be a plus. Equals 10, and 4y minus x equals 6. And let's see what our tutor said here. So we'll just go over this step by step. Call this equation 1. Call this equation 2. Looking at equation 1 for now. Equals 10 minus 3y. X equals 10 minus 3y over 2. You sub that into equation 2. Equals 4y minus. So sub into 2 equals 4y minus bracket 10 minus 3y over 2 equals 6. You multiply everything by 2, you get 8y minus bracket 10 minus 3y equals 6. Oh, this is supposed to be 12 because you multiplied it by 2 also. This gives you 11y equals 22, y equals 2. Plug that into here, into equation 1. You should get 6. So we'll just bring equation 1 over here. So, 3 bracket 2 plus 2x equals 10. 2x equals 4, x equals 2. So x and y are both 2. I agree with that over there. And then the second equation, or the second set of simultaneous equations, second set is y equals 2 plus x, y equals 3 plus x, and you just sub one of them into the other. You get 3 at 3 plus, that should be a plus, not a star. Two, again, should be a plus, not a multiplication sign. 2 plus x, bring it over, you have, this is not possible because if you bring it over, that's 0. See what our junior tutor said. Second set of equation cannot be solved. Cross-check the equations you gave, and we're in agreement with that. So that's that. So the first one, at least, x is 2 and y is 2, and our junior tutor got the exact same thing. So say correct, great, explanation, solution is correct. And I believe this is the last question I have for today. Expected values are A, the values that you expect from an individual, B, mean values, C, weighted average outcomes, D, both B and C. So the answer should be D, both B and C. Excuse me. Let's see what our junior tutor said here. Answers both B and C. Mean values and weighted average outcomes. Expected value plays a significant role in statistics. The expected value is defined in statistics where the process is repeated over and over again to calculate the average success or mean of the process. That helps understand the positivity or negativity of the process. It is a measure of central tendency where the experiment is repeated many times until the mean value of the experiment is found. So I agree with this, and basically B tells you it's a mean value. Weighted average is another way of finding the mean. Keyword here is average. So value that you expect from an individual. Not really. No, actually. But mean value is the average value, and weighted average outcomes is also, again, talking about average, so it should be B and C. So this is also correct. Great explanation. Solution is correct. And I believe that is all. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to just go over the stream, and encourage you to keep on submitting your questions, and we'll do the very best to continue answering them. So that's all from me for tonight, and